Hi everyone, so in this video I want to talk about anxiety around toxins and events that have happened to you that can really contribute to making you feel very uneasy and just feeling hopeless. Now, many people I've spoken to in the past and in the present, and myself included, is worrying about certain toxins, certain things that have happened to you and not letting them go. And building this story in your mind that really can sabotage your efforts to get well. So this is a common one. People worrying about amalgam fillings. They have neurological symptoms. They research mercury. They know it's a very toxic substance to the human body. They start to relate certain symptoms with the amalgam fillings. And they start to build this story where I have amalgam fillings. It is causing me these problems. I will not be okay until I get rid of these amalgam fillings. I do not have the finances to get rid of my amalgam fillings. Therefore, I'm doomed. This cycle goes on and on and on. And I can relate to it because it's the very same cycle that I had. I had tick bites at the time that my health really went down. I had huge amounts of antibiotics at the time that my health was just going downhill. I had a very bad reaction to a vaccine when my health went down. And when I was in the thick of it, when I was in bed with ice packs on my arms, and I was wondering whether I'd ever be okay, I would go and think about these things that contributed. At the time, I didn't think they contributed. I was like, this is it. This is what has caused my problems. I would research about Lyme's disease. I would research about what can happen when someone has a bad reaction to a vaccine. I would research what would happen with long-term antibiotics. And all this did was solidify the story in my mind. I was like, oh my God, I was having loads of antibiotics at the time I had this vaccine. I also got bit by a tick. What if the antibiotics destroyed my immune system to the point where Lyme's disease was allowed to wreak havoc on my body? What if there is a huge amount of antibiotics going into the body and the vaccine with the adjuvant causes a reaction in me that's much stronger because my immune system's just not in a good space? And I start mapping out all these things completely out of my control. I was like, wow, I'm going to have to go and get diagnosed for Lyme. I'd look into diagnosis about Lyme, how it's not always accurate either way. Then I'd look at worst case scenarios of people just never getting better and people having vaccines and just never having answers. And I'd just build and build and build and build this story that just made me feel hopeless, perpetually anxious, terrified, just no answer. And before I knew it, I'd worked myself up to such an extent that I am frozen in stress and fear and anxiety on top of the living situation I was in. The abuse, the psychological abuse, the hopelessness, the having no penny to my name, depending on someone that is abusive, and I would end up in agony. My body would be in agony. I then couldn't sleep. That then perpetuated the cycle, and before I knew it, I was on a roller coaster, and I'd built up such a momentum that I could not get off. Okay? I think it's very important that we leave the stories behind. What has happened has happened. I had all my vaccines. I had all those antibiotics. I had a tick bite, and the tick was allowed to stay on me all day. Okay? It may or may not have Lyme. I cannot change that. All that I can do in this moment is to look after myself, do the best for myself. And by letting go of the story that I'd built that certain toxins caused me to be in the state that I was in, I managed to get a little bit of, what's the word? I was allowed to have a bit of hope that I may be able to get out of this. And this OCD and this fear and this helplessness, all these things, what do you think it does to a nervous system that's already burdened, that's already has a lot of pressures in life and everything else? What do you think it does when we start building these stories about certain toxins and the body not being able to handle them? It really works against you. And I know it's not easy to start undoing these stories we've built over years, but it's very important that we start. For example, I currently live between an asphalt factory and a quarry, and there's constant dust in the air. There's constant plumage of God knows what over our house every single night. I know that looking at that is not optimal for me and my family's health. I know that that is probably going to contribute to something. I don't know what. I don't want to make that assumption. But circumstances cannot permit me to leave this home, and there's very little I can do about it. All I can do is ensure we have a air filter in the house and put it on from time to time, look after my health in other ways, and leave it at that. Because the alternative is to add more dis-ease into your body and your mind, and it's only going to contribute to you suffering even more. Okay, you just have to understand, where is that line? Where do you stop worrying about something that is out of your control? Understand that there are people out there that have had the vaccines, had mercury fillings, had all of these things, and they just went on with their lives and never even thought to think about it. It's just the circumstances that you find yourself in have led you to try and find out what has caused them for you, understandably. So I hope this just helps you maybe start to see that there's stories that are going on in your unconscious or your conscious. You have OCD patterns over particular things, and maybe they are not benefiting you.